Hello, hello, and welcome to Decaf, a podcast by the Beacon Center of Tennessee. Taylor here on a very rainy day in Nashville, but I am joined by not Mark, so I'm feeling like my self esteem will be higher by the time this episode is over than it usually is. But I'm joined by our newest employee at Beacon, Wen Fa. Wen is our new Director of Legal Affairs. We have been searching high and low for the perfect person, and I gotta say, when I first met Win, I texted Justin immediately afterwards, all caps, hire him. And there are a few reasons why, which I'll get into later in the podcast. It has absolutely nothing to do with his legal powers, which I'm sure are incredible. And I've seen his work and they're great. It was all based on personality and vibes. So Win, it's so great to have you here today.
It's really great to be here. As I've told you in person, I'm a huge fan of Decaf. I've listened to every single episode so far, so it's really great to be here.
Yes, so that was one of the things. I always say I'm a fan of anyone who's a fan of mine. So that was one of the things when I sat down and you started talking about watching Decaf and, giving me a hard time as an Alabama fan, which we will get to because I am so very upset about one thing about your personality in particular, but we'll get to that. um, when you sat down and started talking about that, I was like, oh yeah, this guy's going to fit in. He's talking trash out of the gate. This guy's going to fit in just fine on the Beacon team. Win, tell us a little bit about you, your background, and why you wanted to work for a Tennessee think tank of all places.
Yeah, definitely. So my background is in public interest litigation. I've worked for almost 9 years as an attorney for Pacific Legal Foundation, a liberty-minded organization that's based in California but does litigation all over the country. And obviously, I'm a huge fan of organizations like Pacific Legal, like Beacon, Institute for Justice, that really represent everyday Americans and fighting for their rights, whether that be property rights, the right to innovate, the right to earn a living. And I just think that's so important. And, I think Beacon's just got a great team, meeting you, meeting Justin, meeting Steph, seeing all the great work also in the not just the communications team, but also on the policy side and the other departments at Beacon. I just think this was a great opportunity for me to really come in and make a difference in the
Yes.
legal arena, because I think that's so important. There are so many Americans whose individual rights and constitutional rights are violated by the government every day. So I'm really looking forward to coming in here at Beacon and representing those Americans and fighting for their constitutional rights.
When joining our team should make everyone in Tennessee excited because I think that we could all probably on our team describe ourselves as rabid when it comes to defending liberty and promoting liberty for Tennesseans. And one of my favorite things to say that Beacon does, and one thing that hooks people every time I say it, they're like, tell me about the Beacon Center. And I'm like, well, blah, blah, blah. We do research, we advocate, but we also sue the government. And people are like, oh, that's so sick because there's such a need for it because the government just comes in, they do whatever they want to do, and there are so few groups or people that can hold them accountable. And that's one of the beautiful things about think tanks and organizations that do this public interest litigation is if legal battles can drag out for years and years and years and absolutely take someone to the bank for like you have to pay a lot of money to have lawyers who can continue over and over to deal with the government as you go through these things. But that's one of the beautiful things that we're able to do with our clients that we represent in these public interest cases is we say, sit back, don't worry about it, we'll handle this, and you owe nothing to do it because we believe that this is what is right. And so I love working for a kind of mission oriented organization that's like, we're doing this because we believe it's right and it's good. And we're tired of the government stepping on you and telling you you can and can't do certain things that you actually can do.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know how much readers or listeners to the podcast have read about my personal background, but I actually immigrated to the United States from China. So I really think it's something that even I myself take for granted, that a lot of Americans take for granted, that you can stand up to the government, whether that be the federal government, state government, local government. I've sued all of those different entities before, and you can get a judge to write on a piece of paper that what the government is doing to you is wrong. When the government is stopping you from earning a living, from building on your own property, that's wrong and that's unconstitutional. So we have a court system that vindicates constitutional rights. And I think that's so important. And that's something that Americans should be taking advantage of and standing up for their own constitutional rights.
I agree. And that is why we do what we do. So if you're listening to this and you have an issue, property issue, working it, not necessarily like labor as we think of it, but the government saying you have to do this, that, or the other to have your job, let us know. We would love to chat with you and figure out if there's something we can do to tell the government, actually, you can't tell them that. It's one of our favorite things to do. We love that. You can visit our legal cases page on our website, submit a case inquiry, or just email me directly at taylor@beacontn.org. I'll make sure it gets to the right people. But we'd love to hear from you because we are eager and excited to sue the government a little more. I mean, it's such a fun thing to say. Like, we sue the government. Like, it's so sassy. I love it. Sassy is probably not the right word that you lawyers would use, but I feel like it's sassy, and I like to say that we do it. Let's jump right into our podcast topics for today. This is one that Wen wanted to talk about especially, and I think it's a great one to talk about. Nashville Metro Council has just approved its budget for this year. It is a really huge budget. We talk about it a lot, especially last year. If you've been listening for a long time, you'll remember that in our pork report, and we actually talked about this on the podcast, Nashville Metro Council had decided to take $500,000 and send it to Planned Parenthood for various things. And in doing that, they cut money from other departments, from first responders, libraries, other services, parks in the Metro Nashville area. And then this year, they have authorized a budget that dedicates $100 million in new spending for public schools, which I live right across the street from a high school. I walk around it every day. I see it. There are schools in Nashville that need aesthetic improvements as well as probably some good stuff on the inside. A pay increase for Metro employees, 6.4 million for litter and streetscape to make the streets cleaner. If you've taken a walk down Broadway or Second, you probably will notice why we need all of those things. But I get kind of torn on city budgets because sometimes I'm like, okay, these things are really necessary. However, you've spent money in such a terrible way in the last few years with stadiums and incentives. Where's this all going to come from? I don't know, Win. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think ultimately it's about limiting government to its proper role as, protecting individual
Mm-hmm.
rights. I think, when the government is handing out millions of dollars to all of these different projects, you have to remember that it's not just making its own money, it's taking money from taxpayers that they could use
Yes.
to improve their lives and to trade with other people in Tennessee and improve
Mm-hmm.
each other's lives as well. And that's what we really advocate for here at Beacon. We advocate for free markets. We advocate for individual rights. We advocate for liberty for all Tennesseans and all Americans. And I think that's so important. One of the things that I think it ties into is, you have the government in that report that you just talked about,
Mm-hmm.
spending millions of dollars. We see this in governments all across the country in the public education monopoly, and that's
Mm-hmm.
one thing that we really advocate for at Beacon, though, is not to have a one size fits all solution, but to have school choice. We're big defenders of school choice
Yes.
at
Big
Beacon.
time.
We're defending it in the courts. We're advocating for it in our communications materials. We believe that, students, just like every other American, should have the schools that best fit their educational needs. And I think that a
Yes.
competitive marketplace in education is just as important as competitive marketplaces elsewhere. And that's why it's so important to have the private sector play a role rather than have the government sort of dictate everything as a monopoly.
I fully agree with that. And, the ESA program in Tennessee is growing. We would love to see it grow by leaps and bounds more because, like I said, there are great public schools in Tennessee. However, there are also some public schools that don't meet the needs of various children. These students need either, so many of them need more help or so many of them need a better fit. And we see it over and over and over again. And I think that one thing that the government does is when schools have trouble, they just toss more money at the problem. And that doesn't necessarily, if you look at studies, there are so many studies out there that show that it takes less in certain cases to educate a child in a private school than their zoned public school district, but the outcomes are so much higher. And that, you can't put that on top of everything, but you can put it on top of a lot of cases. And see that even though a public school might be meeting a student's needs in one area, it might not be meeting the student's needs in a different area, or even in the same school each child can't get the correct education that fits them the best. Parents deserve to be able to choose. That's what we're advocating for with charter schools, with ESA programs, advocating for and shining a light on homeschooling and microschooling and pod schooling. There are so many different ways that parents and teachers and Americans in general have come up with better solutions. And instead of continuing to throw money at public schooling to fix the problem, I firmly believe that a horse race yields great results. And so if these horses in the back start running faster, the horses in the front are going to have to run faster. I just believe that competition, it's a Ronald Reagan thing. Okay, my parents, the first chapter book I ever read was like Ronald Reagan's biography, and he was talking about the rising tide and all ships and everything like that. So I was really just like drinking this in at a young age. But I think that with schools, it's no different. It actually might matter, at least to me, more. um I've looked at this budget. I've looked at the articles about the budget. There are a couple of things that I'm like, is that political? But overall, my hope, and I'm wondering if you have a similar one. When my hope is that Metro Council and Metro in general stops funding pet projects and or political projects and focuses on what the role of government is. We have talked for over a year specifically, but for years and years and years, that government, specifically local governments, need to get back to the basics. And that is my hope for Nashville, is that we stop doing all these little things and get back to the basics.
That's definitely right. And especially when you look at sort of the ability of the private sector to do these things, the government's not just, I think in some cases it's fair to say wasting taxpayer dollars on things that
Yep.
the taxpayer doesn't care, things
Nope.
that they don't care anything about. But they're also sort of crowding out in some cases the ability of entrepreneurs. Like I said earlier, I'm a big fan of entrepreneurs, small businesses owners
Mm-hmm.
that really innovate and create solutions for everyday Americans. And we should let those people
Yes.
find solutions to everyday problem and not just put it all on government agencies, government bureaucrats to just throw money at a problem until they magically hit a
Yes.
solution.
Because I mean, money's great, but it can't solve everything. You got to leave it up to
Yep.
people to figure out what they do. Speaking of money is great, but not always the answer. Let's jump into our second topic, which has been talked about. Like, I am so neck deep in this Oceangate Titanic thing. These folks, we don't really know what has happened, have invested so much money into going down to see the Titanic. And I will say, if I wasn't like, if I didn't have like crippling claustrophobia, I think it'd be cool. I have read books about the Titanic. I have watched so many YouTube videos about it. I know all the conspiracy theories. I know everything about it. I think it would be so cool to see the Titanic. Listen, when something you don't know about me is when I fixate on something, I spiral hard. Like, I get so down deep in the nitty gritty of things that I become an expert, like an internet expert, which is not a true expert. I will say I'm aware of my flaws. I'm riddled with them and I'm aware of them. I hyperfixate on these things. The Ocean Gate saga is something that I cannot figure out for the life of me. How this has happened, I've seen. First of all, let's just put it out there. We're so devastated for the people and the families of the people that can't be found. Okay, that deserves to be said out of the gate. Secondarily, what is going on and where is this thing? I think the fact that the ocean, we have explored more about space. We know more about space than we do about our own ocean, is absolutely terrifying. Therefore, you could not convince me to get in a tiny little pod controlled by an Xbox controller and go 3 miles underneath the ocean. You could never convince me to do that. However, I do see the adventure, travel, risk seeking. I get that. I get it. I wouldn't do it, but I get it. I I don't even know what can be said about this at this point. Like I've seen all these videos about the safety precautions on the ship, and this guy went on Good Morning America and talked about the overrides that would launch them back to the surface unless they were caught on something or something horrible happened. It just I can't wrap my brain around it.
Yeah, it's certainly a very sad story. One of the things that I've been reading about, and this is just a few people, I don't think it's representative of everybody who posts on social media, but
Mhm,
personally, unfortunately, have seen some hateful comments on
mhm.
social media saying, well, these people are rich and therefore they deserve less sympathy or something like that. Personally, I'm an individualist first and foremost. I think that individuals should be judged on their individual qualities, not on their membership. We should stop having these collective notions of, oh, class warfare, race warfare, things like that. I don't think that's
Yes.
helpful in a free
No.
society. I think it's going to be, regardless of who was on this trip, I think it would be an extremely sad story that they could be lost. They could have
I
their
know.
I think it's very sad. And the other thing is, I don't think, you know, there is this trend that I've seen in some circles about sort of demonizing people who make money. But as
I
I've learned from
know.
my experience representing entrepreneurs in Colorado, Florida, Illinois, all over the country, it's good. It's great. That's why I myself, my parents and I, came to this country. That's why many immigrants come to this country. They want to earn a living in a
Mhm.
free society, in a society where they could exchange their labor for other goods, and for the right to earn a living is just so important. So I think we should stop demonizing entrepreneurs,
I know.
capitalists, and we should really recognize that this is really cap- capitalism is really integral to a free society.
I know, and that's why I kicked this off by saying money doesn't solve all your problems. We have to remember that just because these people have enough money to go down in a ship like this doesn't mean they're not still just people like the rest of us. They still wake up every morning and go to sleep every night. They require food. They need families. They need love, just like the rest of us. We're all just people. They just might have had a better idea or been more successful than me, but they're still just people, just like me and you. And I totally agree with you. You can't demonize somebody for having success. Now, oftentimes we see people, unfortunately, we see it in the media all the time with big celebrities or whatever, fail the test of success. But success in itself is not something that ought to be demonized. And so, if I had $250,000 to spend on a trip, I probably wouldn't spend it on this, but I'd be doing something crazy. I'd probably I'd be on Jeff Bezos's spaceship real quick going up to space and being able to experience that. But yeah, I would not be in a tube under the ocean. But we can't, I think that you're so right. People are so quick to pass judgment on people that don't behave like them and don't have the lifestyle that they have without even thinking, well, what would I do if I could afford this? Would I not do something crazy just to say that I was one of the people that did it? I mean, I think it's really unfair to try to walk in someone's shoes that you're not actually walking in, and that's just the culture of social media. I talk about it with my girlfriends all the time. That's the culture that we're living in. Kind of scary to think about, you know, having kids growing up in this day and age. It was hard enough like in the 90s to compare, and now with social media and everybody talking, Cardi B's weighing in. Like, come on, girl, go back to making music. Your music's good. Don't stay out of this. But it just is so rampant, and I'm so sad for those people, but I'm also sad for the people that continue to criticize them, because what does that say about their life and their satisfaction? I think about that. Mark makes fun of me because I'm kind of emotional when it comes to things like that. And I'm like, when people are getting online and trashing folks that they don't know anything about, what does that say about your life? That
Yeah.
that does make me sad. Um, so anyway, we will be, I'm sure you're like me when just like completely neck deep in this stuff. My entire TikTok for you page is Oceangate. And I've seen the exact same comments like 5 or 6
Yeah.
times, and I still can't stop watching it. I'm like, I want this seeping into my pores. I want to know everything about it. But like I said, the ocean is vast and deep and very unexplored. And it's a really intimidating and scary place. So, who's to say what will happen? But did you see that there's this British television channel that's already airing a documentary on it? It like came out last night or something. How do they do it so fast? I mean, I love documentaries, but they got that crap out so fast. I don't understand how they did it.
I did not, and I no spoilers, but I believe there's a new Black Mirror episode about this phenomenon.
What? Oh my gosh. Okay, this is another thing that Wen and I bonded over when we first met was television. We are television watchers. I mean, Apple TV is some of my favorites. I still haven't watched Tetris. I promise it's on my list. I'm watching The Big Door Prize right now. But of course, there's a new Black Mirror episode. And of course, I will be watching it eyes peeled for every single detail. um, Another thing that we bonded over or didn't really bond over. Okay, I will say we bonded over our love of college football.
True.
We differ over our teams. And I am so frustrated because the landscape of our team, we're now at number 13. The landscape of our team when it comes to sports fandom is really diversifying. And I don't like that. Okay, because Alabama is a very easy team to hate. I would say all 12 of the people on our staff, aside from me, hate Alabama. We just keep adding people who hate Alabama. And then now we've got a Michigan fan. And I know, okay, if you've been listening to the podcast for a long time, you'll know that I was cheering for Michigan to beat everyone, mostly because down with Georgia forever and ever. I will never support Georgia because they are threatening. And I another flaw that I see that I'm okay with. But Win comes in, so nice. We're vibing, we're talking, and then he drops, "I'm a Michigan fan." And I was like, please, sir, no more. Now, some of my best friends are Michigan fans, but to have to be in an office with another person who's not a fan of my team, it hurts. It hurts. But you're the nicest. You're one of the nicest people in our office so far. Don't ruin this for me, Win.
I'll
But
try not to.
I'll let you talk about Michigan for a little while. How do you see your prospects this season? Please be gentle. I'm still very sensitive about last season. How do you see your prospects this season? And what do you plan to do on the team to make us more cohesive and not as combative when it comes to football? You might not have a plan about that because I've been here 5 years and I sure don't.
Yeah, I don't have a plan about that. I just want to give a little bit of background about why I'm a Michigan fan.
Yeah, tell us why. You're not a bandwagoner.
I'm not a bandwagoner. No, I went to undergrad at University of Texas at Dallas, and the sport that the UTD Comets were known for was chess. And I don't think I can watch chess for more than 5 minutes. So I was like, okay, I don't really have a team.
Comets.
Yeah,
you did not have a team.
And so I went to law school. Most people they like their undergrad team over their law school team. That's natural. But since I didn't really have an undergrad team, I was like, okay, went to law school at Michigan, went to a bunch of their games, and became a Michigan fan. And I really think, there were a lot of years of heartbreak. Sometimes it was just overall bad team. Other times it was a very good team until we played Ohio State and then got demolished by Ohio State. I think the last 2 years have been really great from a Michigan perspective.
Yeah, y'all wrecked them last year. That was beautiful. Any team associated with Urban Meyer is no team of mine. So I loved seeing that.
And I honestly think this year could be our year. I don't think that we're the favorites to win. Sad to say, I still think Georgia's the favorites.
So horrible.
But I do think that, we have a lot of our star players, a quarterback, our two top running backs coming back. We've got a lot of great players coming in from the transfer portal. And there's not an elite team. Alabama was an elite team that they're the odds-on favorite to win every single year. But every single team, even the good ones, has question marks coming into this year. So I don't think we're the favorites, but I think that this is going to be as good of a chance for a Michigan national championship as any.
And I will say the same principle that I think applies to the economy and business of the horse race. Even though I hate anyone being remotely competitive with Alabama, it makes for a fun season. If you've got teams in different conferences that are really, really good, it makes for a really fun playoff, a really fun season. Fun watching game day every Saturday morning, fun watching Sports Center during the week when they bring in the betting lines and who's favored over this team. That's what Mark loves, and he's gotten me into loving it too and watching it. I will say at least we can both hate Georgia and Ohio State together. I think those might be two. I mean, Auburn is definitely my top hated team. Like everybody knows that. But Georgia and Ohio State, when it comes to actual threats, like I just hate Auburn just because that's what we do. But when it comes to actual threats, Ohio State and Georgia have been a thorn in my side for the last few years, which is why I've been rooting for Michigan more because y'all are just more palatable to me than either of those teams are. And so I'll take it. And I hope you guys are good. I would love to face off with you. I mean, I know I'm like speaking out of turn considering Alabama's got a lot of problems of its own, but I would love to face off with you guys in a playoff. I think it would be so fun.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Honestly, I can see why you don't like Georgia and Ohio State. I think over the last 3 years, only two other teams have recruited at the level that Alabama has, and that's
Mm-hmm.
Georgia and Ohio State. I definitely
I
think
know.
that in terms of talent level, they're the top tier of teams. But all of those teams have question marks. They're breaking in new
Exactly.
quarterbacks. I believe all three of those teams are breaking in new quarterbacks.
Exactly.
Michigan's got its quarterback. He's
I
been kind of
know.
up and down, but he's very talented, and the running game has been spectacular, and they're bringing not just one but two superstar running backs back this season. So I'm excited. I'm not saying that we're going to win the national championship, but I think this is as good of a chance as any year.
This could be your year. And if I was still sports betting, which I'm not after a horrible, tragic Masters golf tournament disaster a few years ago, I gave up sports betting. But if I was betting, I would put an early bet on Michigan to at least make a playoff run
Yep.
this year, if not take it all, because there is more certainty with your team than there is with the other three of us. So of these top four teams that played, a couple years ago in the playoff, I I think that y'all have a really good chance. And I would be happy for you. I mean, two of my best friends are Michigan fans. I would be happy for you guys. I mean, I wouldn't be that happy. Like, I would still lay in my bed wrapped up in a quilt in the dark and be sad and depressed about it. But, like, I would be, like, like 2% happy for you guys,
Okay.
which is more than I could say for Ohio State or Georgia, even on a good day. So take that with what you will. It's a huge compliment that I would even be 2% happy for anyone but Alabama.
Sure.
And you'll just have to endure football season in our office because if any of our staffers are listening, you know who you are. It's insufferable and it hurts. And I don't like it. Justin, one time at a staff meeting, came in after Alabama had lost a game and put a tissue box at my seat at the coffee table and had printed off Crimson Cry box because like just to make fun of me. Like it really is a hostile work environment when it comes to football season, but I dish it right back out, so I can't really say much about it. Before we go for the day, I feel like y'all have all gotten to know Win really well. You've gotten to know his political philosophy, which fully lines up with everyone at Beacon. Limited government, competition, capitalism. We love to hear it. The first Michigan fan I think we've ever had on our staff. But I wanted to do some rapid fire questions because you don't really know a guy until you know these questions. So, Win, are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. What is your favorite holiday?
Christmas.
Ah, good answer. Your favorite food genre? I know genre is not the right word, but your favorite type of food?
Oh, there's so many to choose
I
from, but I
know.
am going to go some sort of steak, maybe a ribeye, but could depend
Oh
on day.
yeah. How do you do your steak cook? How do you cook your steak?
I like it rare.
Yes, I'm a medium rare girl. My dad always did rare. I got to go medium rare, but the pinker the better. Favorite music genre?
Honestly, I like a lot of different types of music, whatever is popular, but I really like rap and hip hop from the 2000s, late 90s, maybe early
Yes.
2000s.
I can agree with that. Mark and I had a conversation on a podcast, which you probably listened to, and we're like, music has just been going downhill since the late '90s, early 2000s. So that's a good choice. Favorite place you've ever traveled? Favorite trip you've ever been on?
Oh, there's so many great places. I really like Paris internationally. I think
Mm-hmm.
domestically, I love New York just because, I love capitalism. And I think New York,
Yes.
regardless of its policies, you see all of those companies and, just businesses and stuff there. So it's a great city to be in.
When you and I are more similar than I ever knew. This one might be hard. Favorite movie?
Oh, favorite movie. I probably have to. I don't want to commit to any movie. I really like,
Sure.
for some reason, Black Hawk Down. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just a very
That was
interesting
so
movie. I don't
good.
know. I
That
don't
was
really have a
so
reason for loving
good.
it. Yeah.
Okay, that's a really good one. That's way better than mine and way better than Mark's. And then last one, what is your hobby? What is something that you do when you're not suing the government that you really enjoy doing?
Yeah, I really love listening to podcasts and audiobooks. I just love learning about things. I actually enjoy the experience of reading a physical book better, but it's just, when
Hmm.
I'm driving and stuff like that, going out on a walk, it's just much easier to listen to a podcast and or audiobook. Obviously, favorite podcast, you already know it's Decaf. So,
I know. Favorite. You got any other recs for people who are listening? Because I feel like I talk about Dateline and Crime Junkie all the time because I'm one of those like millennial girls that listens to true crime and then wonders why I have anxiety. You got anything to recommend to our listeners that's not anxiety causing in a podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of podcasts, I like things like Divided Argument. It's a podcast about the Supreme Court. I like the Ayn Rand
Cool.
Institute's podcast about liberty in general.
Yeah.
And then in terms of audiobooks, I really like Shoe Dog, the book, the autobiography by Phil Knight, who started Nike.
Okay.
Just a very interesting and inspiring book about entrepreneurship and all the, despite the fact that he's an extremely successful business person, all the
Yes.
obstacles and threats to his business, when he was building it
Yeah.
up. I think it's just an amazing story of an entrepreneur.
Did you watch Air? Speaking of that
I
book, have you
did.
seen?
Great movie. Great
I
movie.
I loved it. I loved it. People were like hating on it when it first came out, and Blake and I went to see it. We were like, "Why is this getting hate? This movie is incredible." Okay, so you have 5 stars from both me and Wen. If you're listening to this podcast and you haven't watched Air, now's the time. It's on Prime, so
Watch it.
no excuse. No excuse. It's time to watch. Well, Wen, that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us. This will not be the last time because you're so much nicer to me than Mark is. Um, Anything else you wish to tell our listeners before we sign off?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Well, this has been Decaf, a production of the Beacon Center of Tennessee with Taylor and Wynn. If you haven't already, you should subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We will see you next week.